Hello there, and welcome to Gooner U, where there are no degrees because the learning never stops. I'm Dove, a TA here at Gooner U, and my friend Keith is our stalwart distinguished professor of Arsenal and football studies. Enter our classroom as we discuss the week's news involving Arsenal, Premier League, Champions League, and international football, all from the perspective of a couple of Americans. This week featured a home match against Manchester United and an away match at Craven Cottage against Fulham. Against the Cottagers? Is that a thing?
Yes. I should add the one Premier League ground I've actually attended a game at.
Right.
Cottage. So the club was founded in and has its headquarters in a small cottage which sits at the corner of the stands, and I could see it on a couple of shots.
Oh, okay.
So yes, the Fulham is sometimes known as the Cottagers. They also have a long-standing history of Fulham America, a long-time home for various American players. I saw Brian McBride and Carlos Bocanegra. Shortly afterwards, they acquired Clint Dempsey, who took them to the semifinals of what was then called the UEFA Cup, which is now the Europa League. So there's a long history of Americans playing there, including current American international Anthony Robinson. Was probably the second best player on the team after Christian Pulisic.
Okay.
But yes, the Cottagers is very much their name, or a common nickname for Fulham in West London.
Right. Yeah, so one thing I wanted to follow up on when it comes to last week's episode, we made mention in brief reference to the West Ham fans booing every time Declan Rice did anything, and you and I chuckled about it. For any listeners who may not be aware of why West Ham fans would be booing, would you like to remind us, Keith?
Right, because we're here to help people learn things. Yes, no, that's fair. So as a reminder, Declan Rice, formerly of West Ham United, he left the club in not this past season, but the previous one, so the summer of 2023, signing for a rather large transfer fee, signing with Arsenal. And having left West Ham, the fans have expressed their disapproval with his leaving, even though no one involved is terribly surprised or bothered by it. But these things happen when players leave. When players leave like this. For example, we're talking about Fulham this week with a number of former Arsenal players: Emil Smith-Rowe, Alex Iwobi, Bernd Leno, all were in the lineup, on the starting lineup this weekend. Because of the way they left, they're probably not going to be booed when Fulham comes to the Emirates later this season. But
right.
Sometimes you'll see that, especially the sense of, he left. I mean, West Ham feels kind of hurt by his leaving, right? He left. He left for what he thought was a better club, which, I mean, no offense to West Ham, but well, yeah, certainly, obviously, much closer to the top of the league.
Right, and he was their captain. I mean, I imagine it'd be similar to like if Odegaard left us for Manchester City. I imagine it'd be a similar kind of feeling probably when we played
depending on
Manchester
the circumstances
City.
of his leaving. Yeah, I mean, you could argue, for example, that Rice left after having led West Ham to the Europa Conference League trophy, their first ever European trophy. I mean, yes, it's the Conference League; it doesn't feel that important. But I mean, if you're West Ham, you never won it before. I mean, never won anything in Europe before. It was a really big club, and really kind of a nice, sort of a cap for his tenure at West Ham.
Yeah. So another thing is for any of you who are following our shorts that we post to YouTube and Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. Eventually all those in Threads. Those will all be at the tip of my tongue sooner or later. We had a couple this past week, I should say, that we did not cover on the show proper. And one thing that I wanted to mention is there's a tip on how to make better mid-range passes. You can watch the short for details on that. But I wanted to mention, as those come up, those are all from a book that I'm reading with my son a little bit at a time, which is called Soccer Smarts for Kids, 60 Skills, Strategies, and Secrets. There will be a link to it on Amazon from the show notes. And it's been helpful so far. I've learned at least a couple things. I might share some more as they come up, but it's been an approachable read and something that I would recommend to coaches and parents of soccer players, and I guess even an adult getting back into the game like I have been. So. I heard that the FA Cup draw for the next round happened this week.
Yes, that was Monday. totally forgot that had happened, or that was going to happen, and then just saw the announcement. Oh, Arsenal drew home to Manchester United. Oh, well, that's good. What are the odds? Yeah, so that actually happened on Monday. It's about that time of year. That fixture will take place about a month from now. In the first, not actually the first weekend of, it'll be the first weekend after the first full week, I guess to say, of January. I haven't seen an exact date. I would probably expect to be on Sunday. I assume that's going to be one of the marquee games, probably the marquee game of the draw, which, makes sense. Obviously, two big clubs. It's at home, which is nice. It's one of those. It's a Premier League side, but you think last year we drew Liverpool and Manchester United. Whatever you think about them currently, are not Liverpool. Certainly not an easy game, I think, as we saw from this past week, but a game that, depending on how we decide to play it, should be a game we're favored in. At least from where I sit right now, and it's coming because when it comes after sort of the congestion of the holiday season, it'll actually have we won't actually have a game, I think, right before it in the way that we do. In the way that we're in this stretch of the whole 2 games a week thing.
Right.
Yeah, roughly as far as I can see, our last game before that will be the previous weekend at Brighton, which is going to be a tough one, but that'll be the previous weekend, so we'll have at least a week off before we see United for the Cup.
That's helpful.
Probably will also be the debut of Neto in goal, since that's as far as, well, I shouldn't say he's eligible for the Premier League and the Champions League, but I don't expect.
I pray we don't have to see him in those competitions.
It seems unlikely.
Right, so it's because it's not the League Cup. He's cup tied but only in the League Cup, not the FA Cup.
Correct, because he did not appear in the League Cup or
in the FA Cup.
Well, he did not. That's correct. He did not appear in the FA Cup for whomever we got him from. I don't remember, but yeah, he did not appear in that. So he is only cup tied for Carabao Cup.
So did you get a chance to see the MLS match this past weekend?
I did actually watch a little bit of it.
I should clarify, by match I mean the final, the MLS Cup Final.
Yeah, MLS Cup. The LA Galaxy won their 6th title, most in the league, first since 2014, which is around 10 numbers. Their 6th title, though, defeated New York Red Bulls, who remain, thankfully, without MLS Cup. It was a pretty comprehensive performance. It's interesting, at Galaxy, sort of one of the original star clubs of the league. Of course, there where David Beckham arrived in 2007, had a long run with Robbie Keane and Landon Donovan, and then just kind of fell off after that. And they've been surpassed in a lot of ways by LAFC, even within their own city. And so for them to jump back in, and to do so without Ricky Puig, who's sort of their star player, or their most important player, was an impressive win. I thought the parts I saw, they were pretty comprehensively, I think, better than Red Bulls. I think that was a fair result of the game. So congrats to the LA Galaxy, and thank you to the LA Galaxy for winning MLS Cup, and more importantly, denying Red Bulls the title. We should also add, by the way, Leo Messi was crowned MLS MVP. He did have a really good season, so it's not like it's a totally it's not a total marketing thing. He's I think a deserving winner in that regard. Which also had actually just ended a little while ago. We were recording on Monday night. Just ending a little while ago, the University of North Carolina won the Women's College Cup earlier this evening, defeating Wake Forest for their, I don't remember how many titles. It's a lot. They've won a lot of titles, national titles. And then next weekend will be the Men's College Cup. Ohio State, Marshall, Denver, and Vermont will be in Cary, North Carolina for the Men's College Championship. So
wait, that sounded... How many teams did you say? That sounded like 4 teams. Is that like a semifinal and a final together?
Yeah, it's essentially that's the final 4 of men's college soccer. The women had theirs this weekend. And it's championship season in the American soccer scene.
Right. Ah, cool. All right. Well, it's time to start talking about the week's matches. Before we talk about our match against Manchester United, though, you shared with me an article from The Athletic, which we will have in our links in our description and our show notes. I had seen this headline pass by on The Athletic as I was browsing a few weeks back. Actually, more than a few weeks now. This is in October. It said something about the Battle of the Buffet, and I was picturing like Arsenal and Manchester United like slugging it out at the Golden Corral or something. I didn't know what to expect from this, and I just kind of glanced over it and kept scrolling. But then you said it's something that was worth reading and worth talking about, and now that I've done so, I fully agree. What a wild story. What I will say is, before we go any further, if anyone watching this, listening to this, has not read it and didn't live through it, doesn't know what we're about to talk about, do yourself a favor and read it. The link that I always give to Athletic articles is to Apple News. If you subscribe to Apple News Plus, you get it free. The Athletic is included in your subscription. If not, that will open it up on the website. And if you open it up in Safari, at least on Apple World devices, and you go to the reader mode, I have found in the past, I haven't tried it super recently, but I have found that will show you the whole article. So do it this one time and then buy a subscription to The Athletic if you like what you read. But what a wild story. So, I mean, do you want to start with the Battle of Old Trafford, or do you want to just start at the day's events that it was talking about?
Yeah. So, in some ways, this is kind of we had originally planned this to be kind of a bit of a space filler during the international break, and for various reasons didn't get to it. It's fine. But now, of course, playing United this week, I think a piece like this is sort of a good reminder of what this rivalry used to be, and the early days of the Premier League, especially about at this point. Well, God, at this point now, 2 decades ago. This was the Glamour Tie. This was the big game, Arsenal, Manchester United. And it was, it was a real rivalry in the sense that the two teams, the players, did not like each other. There's a real animosity. It's fascinating. I'd arguably the biggest rivalry in the Premier League today is still probably Manchester City and Liverpool. And a lot of their interactions are marked by a good amount of, I think it's fair to say, mutual respect. Pep Guardiola and then Jurgen Klopp when he was at Liverpool. I say when he was at Liverpool, it was last year. We're generally been very respectful of each other, generally very complimentary to their teams and what they've done. The games are interesting tactically, but I think it is fair to say they lack a certain bite to them. Some of that is just the way the game has evolved. The kind of physicality involved in 20 years ago just doesn't exist anymore. Teams are not allowed to and don't play that way anymore. And to a large extent, that's for the better. I know we kind of enjoy the Bloodsport aspect of it all, but a league where talented players are allowed to use skill rather than simply be bludgeoned, into. I mean, think about the way we react to Bukayo Saka and the physical play he endures. It would have been much worse. It was so much worse.
Oh, yeah.
I want to say back in the day, but kind of was back in the day.
Well, yeah, and there's the one player in particular they were talking about. I'm scrolling through to look up the name. You'll probably remember it, but the one young player they were talking about, the Neville brothers, like beating up on.
Yes, Jose Antonio Reyes.
Right. That reminded me of, like, obviously to a lesser extent, but the way that Saka is treated. Like, well, you can't beat him, so literally beat him.
Yeah, exactly. And there was a line in the general sense from Arsenal fans. Now, I'll date myself here and say that this predates my time watching the club, so I did not watch this when it happened.
Oh,
this
okay.
is a couple of years before me, but I mean, like, I started watching 2006. This was in October 2004, so it's not that far away. In terms of its temporal proximity. I mean, a lot of these players were still on both of these teams,
right,
at that point. I mean, this one, the Battle of the Buffet, was famous because it ended Arsenal's 49 match unbeaten run, which had taken them through their invincible season, which we mentioned before. Started before that. ended at this point. So 49 games spread across 3 seasons. Only one season where they did it all the way, and this was in the Premier League only, so not counting some cups or European competitions where they had lost. And of course, because it was United, it was at Old Trafford, and we've talked about refereeing and sort of the concerns about how refereeing plays out when it comes to when it comes to playing against certain teams and things like that. So this being at United,
Right. That was one thing that I noticed reading this is I understand more now where you're coming from when you see, like, I think the closest I've ever witnessed to anything like this level of match was our match at Manchester City this year, right? That was, or we were home, weren't we?
No, we were at City.
We were away.
There were elements of that. We talked about sort of the clash between Havertz and oh my gosh, Rodri right after the kickoff. It's a little
but overall, like they were kind of rough on each other. You could tell that they were going at each other as hard as they possibly could. But then we also kind of did talk about the officiation, right, with Trossard being sent off at halftime or right before halftime, right? It was that you talk about like the general complaint that the referees are all from the greater Manchester area and that this is how they act. And it's like, I haven't seen enough to agree or disagree with that yet, but like reading the account of what happened in this match, I can see where people believe that. I get it now a little bit more, So yeah, one thing that was interesting for me as someone who came into this without direct experience with either of these teams at that point in time was the oral history format of the article made it a little bit tough for me to follow because I wasn't familiar with these names. Like when the first time they give a quotation from like Gary Lewin, they say Gary Lewin, the Arsenal physio. Like, okay, fine. But then it's like a little ways down. I can mostly tell from context because he's like a unique role. But then like I couldn't keep the Arsenal and Manchester United players straight some of the times. It was a little rough, but I got the gist of it. So it was basically a super contentious match. There were some very questionable calls, some even more questionable non-calls. And then the match ended. Their streak was broken, and they went through the tunnel in drips and drabs to get back to their changing rooms. And a fight broke out, which it's just like I haven't even that Manchester City match that I was talking about earlier from earlier this season, like as tense as things got there, it's just crazy to me that it could come to literal blows. Like that's so far removed from what I've seen in the Premier League as it stands today. That's hard for me to wrap my head around.
Yeah, there's part of that is just sort of the way we like. So much just the change in the players' attitudes. Like players aren't that tribal in the same way anymore. And you see that in a lot of even in American sports too. There used to be a lot more animosity between teams, and now there's a certain sense. Like you see in the tunnel every once in a while, you'll see guys lean over to the other team and give each other a handshake or a high five. Or, we saw that this week with the Fulham game, of course, given some the former Arsenal players there. But yeah, that was not the case back then. So there's really was like these two, they barely interacted outside of the games. They knew they were each other's biggest competition for everything. And so there's, and then of course, again, some of the build up going into this one and the way the game played.
Right. And so it came to blows. They were describing how this tunnel was so tiny and they were so packed in. Nobody had any room to move, and they're all slugging at each other. And then a pizza got thrown and landed on the Manchester United gaffer. That's a term I'm familiar with from my film production studies. And to me, a gaffer is someone who lights a scene. I don't think that's what they meant when they were referring to Sir Alex, who I guess was an instrumental player even before he was a coach. They were referring to him as like a great figure in the history of the game. Like I think No, he was Manchester United's manager. Gaffer is just sort of is slang for a manager. Okay, I have no idea where it comes from. It's much like we call like a baseball manager be a skipper. Right, but that makes more sense to me because it's like, okay, like the captain of the ship, like
no. Sir Alex Ferguson is a giant in the history of Manchester United. Is
a manager though.
Yeah, I mean, won the tremendous number of trophies he won. We should also point out that he is also the last manager to win a Scottish title at a club other than Celtic or Rangers. Won at Aberdeen, which I think was in like 1983, like as in predates you and me. That's how long ago that was. Frankly, deserved to be knighted just for that. It's kind of incredible. But yes, Sir Alex Ferguson is was the longtime Manchester United manager.
But yeah, so I mean, so all of those circumstances are all just bonkers to me. And then on top of it, you have a pizza being thrown.
A slice of pizza.
That wasn't clarified. Are you sure? Because... Okay, so let me just point out.
I don't think it was a full pizza. I don't know, but I don't know.
Let me point out. That would make sense. But one phrase that somebody used either in this article, I think it was in the article, but there was also like a Twitter link that had a video to when the guy fessed up to he was the one who threw it. But I think it was in the article where they talked about his technique was so good, like, and referring initially to soccer, but that even when he threw the pizza, he was throwing it like a frisbee, which you could probably do with a triangular slice of pizza. But I was imagining the entire pie getting thrown like a frisbee.
Yeah.
But yeah, either way.
I mean, all I've really seen to say is the pizza, so I don't know.
Right.
It's
right.
Oh no,
which could refer to either.
there is a quote from Ashley Cole, who was the Arsenal defender at the time, referred to this slice of pizza came flying over my head. So
perfect.
I think there is and it was Cesc Fabregas who did it, who has since admitted it.
Right. But okay, so that's good to know. The picture in my head looks a little bit different with a slice of pizza landing on him instead of like an entire pizza pie draped over his head and shoulder and chest.
Right.
But it gets thrown, and when I'd seen that it was called the Battle of the Buffet or Pizzagate, like I didn't know what about it would be a gate, which is something obviously springing from Watergate back in the 70s with Nixon, but used to refer to like controversies. And I was like, well, what about this would be a controversy? And then they were going into the cover-up after the fact, where these two teams both decide they're both going to get in a lot of trouble if anybody finds out. So nobody say anything about it. And then you get into the prisoner's dilemma, like the game theory part of it, where, well, one of them heard that the other was telling the FA everything, and then they didn't want to be the only ones getting in trouble. So they told the FA everything. And it's just... it's crazy.
Yes, it's There's a little bit of the cover up too. Also, there's just the general sense for the longest time that it wasn't actually clear who had thrown it, because Fabregas, I mean, he did it when he was like 17. So he was a kid, and I mean, some of it's just, of course, the mystery of who it was who threw the pizza for the longest time.
Yeah. Well, and so then in reference to trying to figure out who did it, Brown from United, I don't remember what is it?
Wes Brown.
Okay, there you go. Thank you. Yes, I am seeing now United defender. He's talking about it, and he's talking about defending Sir Alex, and you're backing up your boss. The point is they took the P *******. We're not going to let the gaffer go like that. Absolutely no chance. And later on, he says, rushing head to head clash, boom, who threw that? It was just, what the F are you doing? F ******, and then taking the P ******. Now, the F's I substitute freely. I realize what those are. There's no ambiguity. P with only 3 asterisks, implying to me that only 3 letters are being removed. I don't know what to make of that. Is this like an English term that I haven't heard before?
So the P word is piss. Which
I'm okay with you saying on our show. It's not a curse word.
Yeah. As Americans, we're not really bothered by that. When in England, it's considered a term that's slightly more profane. But the larger phrase is someone's taking the piss, which is, I guess, the best way to say it. The best American equivalent is when they're messing with somebody.
Okay.
You're kind of goading them. You're not being serious. You're just trying to get a rise out of somebody.
Okay.
Just be generally disrespectful as well.
Okay.
Like, are you being serious? You taking the piss? Like,
Right.
yeah,
All right. So like a rude joke, kind of like.
kind of,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for clarifying. That's what everyone tunes in for, is how to properly use British curse words.
As Churchill said, we are two people divided by a common language.
Yeah, but no. So thanks for sharing that. That was very, very interesting. I learned a lot, and that's the kind of thing that kind of makes me feel more like a part of the history and heritage of the club, is knowing about certain key things like that. So.
And it does add a little flavor to the game that was on Wednesday, which, by the way, the idea of Arsenal United being played on a Wednesday is like, you wouldn't have played this game on a Wednesday.
Yeah, so let me ask you. I know when we've had Champions League matches during the week, you're at work and you typically might have it on the background. You might catch bits here and there, but you aren't like watching with your full attention on it, like the weekend matches where you go to the pub. What were your viewing circumstances for this match?
So I was in the office. So we're towards the end of the semester, so it's a little quieter in that regard. So I wasn't. In a lot of cases, I've sort of been called out to things. Go figure. People want to have meetings in the middle of the afternoon. I know, right? But in this case, I had a basically a free week or a free afternoon, so to speak. I mean, I had things to do, but it was nothing there to have. With whatever the setup in my office, have it on the
Yeah.
screen while doing something on the other screen and sort of keeping an eye on it as I went along. So
Yeah.
I was able to get a pretty good sense of how the game played out, even as it was happening. Theoretically, I was doing other things during it.
Mm-hmm. No, that's good. I caught the full match replay. I think it was the next day. It might have even been 2 days later. It was sometime after, and unfortunately, I need to retrain my YouTube habits. Like, I'd tap on a link that would open up the YouTube app, and reflexively I swiped down to get rid of the video that I'm watching. But when I did that, as it swiped down, I saw revealed like all the highlights of the match that I hadn't watched yet and the scores, which it frustrates me so much that they had, like, as someone who's looking for the match highlights when like I prepare the show notes for this show, it's great. There's no ambiguity. Like, that you got the right match if you see the right jersey color and the right score, and it says like the team that you're expecting. But it's frustrating for someone who's trying not to know going into it. But so I knew the score, but that's it. I didn't know anything else. And frustratingly, I was bitten by the same exact thing when it came to the Fulham match. Only it was like the same day. It was like later that day that I went to watch it yesterday. But in between, I still went on YouTube with my son and still reflexively swiped down. I'm retraining myself not to do that so this doesn't happen again. Trying to shut down that vector of spoilage. But yeah, so it was an interesting match. I mean, overall, we did a pretty solid job. Like, overall, like more than what the 2-0 might imply. Like, they didn't seem to really threaten too much, right?
Oh yeah, we were better than them. I mean, let's just say it right out. We are a better team than they are currently. United's going through a bit of transition. New ownership took over last season. They recently let go their manager Erik ten Hag, and the new guy Ruben Amorim, who we mentioned had previously been at Sporting, but not when we played them last week. He was already at United, and they had played well. I think they had a 2 wins and a draw since he had been there, but against some relatively uninspiring competition. I think Everton and Ipswich, and so now to, of course, play at Arsenal was definitely a step up in competition that they weren't. I don't say they weren't ready for, but I think it does sort of say, look, it's good they got those for them. They got those wins, but we're in a different place as a club than they are in terms of where we are, and I think even though we're in a bit of flux, we sort of talked about this a little bit. The injury bug is I don't want to say back because it never really left, but definitely is sort of picking up in intensity. And we started with quite a bit of a makeshift back four.
Right.
Saliba, Kivior, Timber, Zinchenko.
Yeah.
Which is workable, but obviously not ideal. But that being said, Kivior is an able deputy. He's in his right position as a center back. Zinchenko is a natural left back. Timber is a right back. So everyone's kind of in their right positions. And of course, you have, Saliba. But I think they had a couple of opportunities. Did force a couple of good saves from Raya, but for the most part, I think really what the story of this game is. We're set piece FC, sexy Stoke. Where
Stoke.
Stoke City was a club basically thrived on overly physical play because they lacked all skill altogether and scored a lot of goals on set pieces. But yeah, we're just it's funny how it's almost apparently. I did hear a clip. Arsblog had it called the Spanish broadcast, and as Arsenal was lining up on what ended up being, I think, Timber's corner, the Spanish broadcaster started singing the theme song from Jaws. Because there is that sort of sense of sort of impending danger for the opposition, right? Do 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 do
Right.
do 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 do. And there it was. It happened twice. It was a pretty uninspiring first half. I thought we were much more impressive in the second half, and that led to the corners. I think corners were something like 13-0. Just
Yeah.
where we really overwhelmed them, and then Timber with one goal, and then Saliba, well, not his head, but the other side, wound up. It was a butt goal. We'll say it.
Yep.
We'll call it. It was a butt goal for Saliba.
But he was just as excited as if it were a head goal.
Yeah, they don't ask how, they ask how many. But yeah, this was a dominant performance against a team that we really needed to, and sort of continued our good run of form coming out of the break. We had talked about some of the previous games, Forest and Sporting, and then West Ham, and then follow that up with a 2-0. Just sort of keeps the good vibes going, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, and definitely they came out of the locker room at halftime with a much stronger performance than they started off with. I noted a whole bunch of careless giveaways in the first half, just like turning it over unnecessarily, and they sorted that out. And yeah, pulled it out. Had the result that we wanted to see.
The first half was definitely described as a game of football.
Right.
It was not an inspiring performance, but yeah, they definitely seemed to find another gear in the second half, and United just I don't know if it's because of their talent, because of the coaching, because of all of the above, but they just don't have that gear right now or right yet.
Yeah.
Maybe they will by the time we see them at Old Trafford, but maybe they will by January when you see them in the FA Cup. But right now,
I mean, they pulled out a second gear in the Fulham match at a certain point. You could tell that they stepped it up, and hopefully, even with this rotated lineup that we've been seeing, hopefully they can dig down a little bit more. Did you catch toward the beginning of the United match? The commentators mentioned it was our 500th match of the men's senior team at the Emirates.
So
it's an interesting milestone.
500 games there, which is it is wild to say. I've been watching long enough. I started watching the final year of Highbury, so I can't say I've seen all the games at the Emirates, but I have been watching since they moved to the Emirates, and it's kind of impressive and crazy that it's been almost 20 years since they moved.
Yeah, I noticed actually in the Battle of the Buffet article, there's a lot of cool pictures from that match. And it was funny. I noticed the shirt sponsor for Arsenal was O2. I think they're a cell carrier or something over there.
Yeah.
But I actually noticed the Fly Emirates badges on the referees' sleeves. That's funny how things shift over time.
Yeah, how that sort of moves about. There was it is kind of a marker of how long this was and how long ago that was, and to think about where the team has been, especially relative to United, and sort of the way the clubs have fluctuated over that period is an interesting one. But yeah, it was a dominating performance. It feels so weird to talk about a win over United and just kind of we won. It happened. But it kind of was.
Right. Yeah. It was also funny. This was a match where I kind of stuck around for a few minutes after, just kind of reveling. Did you Did you catch what they were playing on the speakers after the match was over? There were two specific needle drops that I noticed.
I did not. After the game was over, because I was on campus a little later than usual to stay to the end of the game. I closed out and then left to
You're done, yeah. So I was watching this at my leisure with the score spoiled, but in the full match replay, and they played Tequila like in honor of Saliba scoring the first goal, and then the second goal, and then Timber by Pitbull featuring Kesha. As another one that's kind of funny. They've got like songs that they play for those players when they score now.
Oh, of course, it's going down.
Right. All right, so let's head over to Craven Cottage. One thing I meant to check with you on when we were talking about the grounds and the site. Are they one of the London teams?
Yes, yeah, West London.
Okay,
so they are still within the city. They're well within the city limits. They have a historical rivalry in West London with Chelsea.
Right, so it's Fulham, Chelsea, West Ham, us, and Spurs.
Fulham, Chelsea, West Ham. We're Crystal Palace as well of the current.
Oh, so there's 6. Okay.
Yeah, there's currently 6.
Crystal Palace was in my mind, but I wasn't totally sure. Okay.
And then I think Brentford is sometimes considered a pseudo, because Brentford is like
a suburb or something,
right on the outside of London proper.
Right.
So Brentford is kind of.
Yeah. So in this match, there was no Zinchenko to start, and I don't think he came on later either, that I recall.
No, he wasn't on the bench. He was hurt.
Okay.
Yeah, he was hurt. Yeah, the injuries are picking up. Gabriel was out this week. We don't know for sure, but it wouldn't surprise me if it was related to, getting punched in the head against West Ham.
No.
Hope he's doing all right.
Right.
But you had Zinchenko going out as well. Obviously, Calafiore's out. Tomiyasu's out.
Right.
Tierney's been making the bench for the last couple games. We're not far away from him there.
Yeah.
But it was kind of interesting that, Kiwior in as a center back, which, okay, fine. But then Arteta decided to have Timber play left back, which he can do. He's done before. But Timber's at left back and then dropping Thomas Partey in as right back, which I don't know, man. It just doesn't work. I don't,
Yeah.
I don't, yeah.
Yeah, Partey was one of the more frustrating aspects of these couple matches. Like there was a couple very obvious chances that he blew, and you could see in his reaction, like he knew that he bunged them. Like, he just, it was like a couple headers that he had missed from corner kicks, and
had definitely had one in the Fulham game, which
there's one in the United match too. There's one in each of those matches, like headers that he blew.
Yeah, and I kind of go with Partey. I can go back and forth on it because obviously he's not a goal scorer, so it's hard to especially I thought in the United game he was fine. He played well. I think it wasn't so much that he was bad in the Fulham game, but he's not a right back. He's played in that position, and there's a concern about the way that by moving him out of position like that, not only him, but now you've also got Timber, who's actually a right back playing at left back, and he can play left back, but he's not really a left back. And so you've now moved a second, because you drop Partey into right back, you put a second player in a right back, and a second player's out of position. And I wonder if maybe, I've heard this suggested, maybe this was the game, honestly, to start Miles Lewis-Skelly. Was on the bench. I mean, look, Fulham is a good team, and they, in some ways, and Arteta kind of made this post-game comment, in some ways, we completely dominated this game. It was played entirely in the Fulham end, and that's a really good team. That's a pretty good team that we just completely hemmed in, but we saw the difficulty we had breaking them down, and you add in, yes, we got a goal on the set piece, but if you look through it, if you watch it, I mean, they were the weather conditions were not good.
No,
the wind especially, because they were getting the remnants. Apparently, there was a storm. It was called Dara. So not a hurricane, but Liverpool Everton was supposed to play the day before on Saturday. That game was postponed because of the storm. We're talking about gusts up to like 80 miles an hour. I mean, that's a serious storm.
Yeah.
And so we were getting some of that, and you could tell it was doing something to the delivery of especially the corners. And, when you're so reliant on set pieces like that, if the delivery starts to be off, it causes a problem for us. And so, especially because we weren't able to generate those kind of good offensive opportunities. And the few we had, I'll be honest, we didn't take them very well. It led to a lot of really weak shots that kind of rolled in on Leno. So
right. Yeah, he had no trouble defending us.
You're right.
Yeah, it was... they only ended up with the one chance. I think the one shot on goal was like their only chance that whole game. It's like the one time we made a mistake, they scored, and that was it.
And a lot of it, I mean, you see Timber is playing into the middle of the field, which is what we expect of the left back, inverting like that. But that means Jimenez is going to go one-on-one with Kivior, who, normally that'd be Gabriel, who's faster, and probably at least holds up with him, or at least is able to force him a little wider. But Kivior just gets beat, and people are out of position. And also, too, honestly, I mean, not to blame Raya for it, but I think Raya's got to do a better job with that.
Yeah, no, I thought the same thing.
Also taking the shot.
Yeah, I agree. He could have done better. He got there, but not strongly enough to stop it. Yeah,
and we've talked about this, right? Early goals change games, and how in this case, because we conceded the goal, Fulham, a team who's already preparing, I think, to play us deeper and receive pressure, now is doing so when we're much more desperate for a goal, and it just made it a case where we were creating opportunities with crosses, and there was I had a sense at halftime, like, if we keep doing that, we will find a goal, or at least it's very likely we'll find a goal. But it was a struggle there.
So yeah, no, exactly. And it was interesting for me. So this was one where, again, I had the score revealed to me beforehand, but because I'm like intentionally avoiding the score, like I don't linger on it. I don't like look in details. Like I see a score and I like immediately like swipe the app away. Right. So there's always like in the back of my mind, there's a small doubt, like maybe I saw it wrong. And so then when we ended up scoring that second goal where Saka headed it in, I'm like, oh, I got it wrong. Oh my God, we pulled ahead. It's 2-1. Oh my gosh. And if it's 2-1, then I know we won at that point. Because like I know that one of the numbers I saw was definitely 1. And there's just like room for doubt. Like the other number, it must have been 2, and I didn't see it. Didn't see it clearly. And then VAR had their say.
Yeah. I mean, he's offside. Like that's a clear cut one to me, honestly. It's frustrating, of course. I mean, we erupted. Like that was a game because it's so frustrating to not to feel like you're carving out the chances, but not getting it, and needing it, feeling like you had to have it, and then you get it, and it's just especially late like that. But yeah, for it to come back like that, but it's interesting, in all the bits I've listened to or reading who are talking about, I don't actually think it's Martinelli's fault necessarily. I think it's Timber. Because Timber's the one who actually plays the ball, and if he receives the ball, and he ends up taking like 3 touches. I think
so you think he took too long?
I think he's got to play that to Martinelli as quickly as possible.
Interesting.
And partly because you see Martinelli is trying, obviously, but Fulham has been very disciplined, and they're playing a higher line, so he's trying to not stray too far. But he's still got acres of space out there on the left-hand side. I think Timber's got to play that ball a lot faster. Maybe after 1 or 2 touches, which allows Martinelli, he's not, maybe he's, on closer to level or perhaps even fully onside, and is able to really make the run because he still has plenty of room. That's the frustrating part, is like that pass needed to come sooner because I think he still has the room anyway. And I think that's kind of, again, by thin margins, but he's very clear. He was once they read to the replay, oh yeah, he is clearly offside. So, yeah.
Do you remember, was that one called offside by the linesman, or was it only VAR?
I think that was VAR that got that one. Because if the linesman calls it, they'll just call it as is, I think.
Right.
But no,
I think so, too.
Because they let it stand, or because the way they reviewed it, I think it was played on, but as a result, because they went to VAR, they were able to look at it and say, "Oh yeah, he's offside."
Right.
But
So
without that, the goal would have stood, I think.
Right, I think so too. So let's revisit that in a few minutes when we get to our dessert for the week. There's an article that I shared with you that we'll talk about when we're done with the match and our player of the week determinations. But yeah, I have some thoughts on that I want to bounce off of you. So yeah, ultimately we walked away with just 1 point, which is not great because, this is a week where we could have gained more on Liverpool, and I think we ended up just drawing even with them, right?
No, we're not even with them because we.
Well, no. I mean, as far as points gained this week, we gained 3 or 4 altogether, and they gained 4 altogether. Was that right?
No, they drew on Wednesday against Newcastle. Newcastle was up 2-0. Liverpool rallied for 3-2, and then Newcastle scored at the death to tie, and that their win against United was to 7 behind. Their game with Everton was the one canceled because of the storm.
Oh, they didn't play it.
Actually, this was a huge opportunity for us. Yes, they had a game in hand and would have played it another time, but this was a huge opportunity for us to really close that gap even further. And we only have 1 point, so we are 6 back of them currently.
Okay,
them having a game in hand, we're actually now 3rd. Chelsea won against Spurs, and so they're now in 2nd ahead of us. Again, we'll see. Chelsea, doesn't seem like they're going away. But again, it's early yet. So I did see a stat. I think last week someone had said as late as February we were 7 points behind Liverpool and we finished 7 points ahead of them. So the fact they have a giant advantage right now doesn't frighten me. It's frustrating, and it's especially frustrating, and I'm sure we've kind of touched on this. It does feel like we consistently get the worst possible result on marginal decisions, whether it's yellow cards, turning to red cards, or offside. And it's not entirely accurate, but it does feel like it
feels that way. Yeah.
Yeah, it does feel. I mean, there were several instances here where we saw Fulham knock the ball away on a free kick, and I thought the referees had no choice but to give cards in those cases, but apparently not. So yeah, I mean, that's not why we drew. We drew because we couldn't create the right opportunity. We fluffed the ones we had, and it's just kind of where we are. And it's frustrating. Again, a team we didn't beat at all last season. But I think the important thing is, 1, is to get some guys healthy so we can play a better defense. And then 2, also just like getting ourselves getting a good result, like getting back on the horse and not don't let this game beat you twice.
Yeah, no, definitely. Let me ask you one random viewing note. Did your signal in the pub drop out at the 66th minute and just lost all video and went to color bars like what happened in the replay that I watched?
Yep, test pattern. Yeah, I don't know what happened, but yeah, that was a thing that happened.
Okay. And maybe that storm was messing with some of their transmission equipment or something.
Could be, yeah.
Yeah. All right, so who is your player of the week?
I thought about this one a lot. I mean, part of the problem is a lot of the guys I was thinking about had one good game against United, but then did some things that I didn't really like in the Fulham game. I mean, Timber, we talked about. I thought he was good against United. I thought Declan Rice was really good against United, but some of his deliveries, set pieces, weren't as good in this one. So I'm going to say Saliba.
Okay.
I think he's still sort of the rock in the center of defense. I mean, and we talk about it. We had a week where we gave up 1 goal over 2 games, and we sort of struggled with the clean sheets the last few weeks. And so to get one, especially with the makeshift defense, to have him as a solid figure there, and for a defender to pot in 2 goals, I think is a pretty good.
Oh yeah,
it's a pretty good week for Saliba.
Well, it's funny. After Gabriel did something similar, like the week before or something, before he got knocked out, literally almost. Good shout for Saliba. I echo what you said about Timber. Like after the Manchester United match, I was keeping a close eye on him at the Fulham match, and overall, he was there at Fulham, but did a great job against Manchester United. Overall, I am going to go with Rice on the strength of his performance at United, and also we are right now the team of scoring from corner kicks, and we scored off of corner kicks from him in both matches. whereas from Soccer only against United. And I haven't picked him in a while, and it's kind of like that's been a recurring theme for us for going on a few weeks now, where that's the bulk of how we're scoring. So may as well give it to the guy who's delivering the goods on those. Although it does concern me a little bit that that if that is our one trick at this point, it all it takes is someone figuring out how to stop that one trick effectively, and then we're dead in the water. But
yeah, although again, stopping that one trick is that's been everyone else's problem, hasn't it?
Well, yeah, they haven't done it yet, but you worry that they'll figure it out. That there's going to be at some point an effective counter strategy. Like if this could work all the time, you'd think everybody else would be doing it already. I mean, I'm sure it's hard to execute. I'm sure it looks easy when we see them doing it, but I'm sure there's hours and hours and effectively days worth of practicing that, but yeah, so let's talk about VAR for a little bit. So there was an article that I shared with you.
Long enough already.
Yeah, exactly. We've wasted too much time talking about VAR to talk about the time the VAR wastes when we're waiting to get a goal decision. But yeah, so I am from time to time browsing through Arsenal related articles, and one came across from the Times. That is the headline is obviously kind of clickbait. Tech is killing the joy of football. Treat offside like rugby's forward pass, which only gets very briefly mentioned at the end and not satisfactorily as far as I'm concerned to really bring the article home. But there's a few things that are interesting to me about this. And one question that I had kind of separately from the article, but to ask you as far as how we feel about VAR now. But basically, he's talking about the continued delays, and it's really starting to look like we aren't going to see the semi-automated offside like at all this season. If it hasn't happened by now, they probably just won't roll it out until next season, we're thinking at this point. But so the first thing that he talks about is how in the age of VAR, we've lost something that used to be a tool in the lineman's belt that is now just completely abandoned, which is you could call someone onside, you could call him offside, or you could call him even. And this idea that you could be even with somebody, and that's okay. It's effectively onside, but sometimes the lineman just calls, well, he's even, and that's okay. Like, it's okay to be even. Once we went to VAR, it became a very binary choice. Like, either the toenail is ahead or it's not. And then we get these, really ticky-tack decisions that and I'm not necessarily saying that the one against Havertz was this, or not Havertz, it was Martinelli this time. Mm-hmm. I'm not necessarily saying that this instance was that, but the way that it makes you feel when you see a goal scored, like you said, toward the end of the match, the winning goal potentially, they're celebrating, and then you have to wait for 2 minutes while they review it and then come back and say, no, it wasn't a goal, right? Like, that's not good. That's not a good experience. And the delay isn't the only bad part of it, right?
No, but I feel like, having read through the piece, I feel like the concept of level is being a little too cute with this. And maybe this is just a linguistic thing that I don't quite see, because level is onside.
Right.
And part of what he's arguing is that because we have this technology now and we can see these finer distinctions, we're making them. And my kind of response to this, well, yeah, I mean, I'm not as comfortable with the idea, or I'm not as big a fan of the idea. I think the more we can do to remove the judgment call aspect of this, and offside is less of a judgment call than many other things. Think about how often we've seen fouls as judgment calls or cards as judgment calls.
Mm-hmm.
Offside really isn't that. Offside is you either in an offside position that is a part of you that can score a goal beyond the last defender, or you aren't. And yes, the cameras have allowed us to sort of narrow down the measurements at which we can make that. But I guess I just sort of find like you're increasingly opening yourself up to subjectivity for something that I think can be increasingly made objective. And he points out as an example. He does use the example from La Liga where Barcelona erroneously had a player marked offside when he was actually on, and part of that was the technology, misread that it was two people's feet, where it's right and
which
and
foot
look,
was whose, yeah.
Right, and it's not as if we're talking about the point of comparison is the tennis, the Hawkeye, which judges on or off the line. I mean, that's why you keep the referees, is to watch for those instances. I've heard this as well with things like the automated strike zone in baseball. You still need the umpire there because where a ball, for example, could theoretically bounce in front of the plate, bounce up, and be in the strike zone, but that's not a strike, and that's the umpire can sit there and say no. But by and large, offside is basically what he's arguing for is the idea. I sort of get the point, but it's generally the argument for the removal of any of these replay systems at all.
Well, not exactly. So what he proposes that I think I agree with, I think could be at least worth trying, not that they will necessarily try it publicly for us to see, but what he proposes is imagine if the VAR is just taking a look on the screen and he's able to look at it from, whatever as close to perpendicular view as they can manage, right? And what he's able to do is call down to the on-field referee and say, you better have a look at this. And with the naked eye, based on the most accurate camera angle they can manage, does it look like he's onside or not? Is he obviously on or offside, in that call, right? Using the naked eye, not trying to draw the lines and measure fingernails, right? Or toenails, because, hands don't count. But not trying to get the tiniest, most minute, but basically with the naked eye, if you had a better view of what happened, would you consider him to be onside is kind of the basic idea.
Yeah, and I think that's a great idea right up until it's your team that gets screwed on the subjective call. Because the referee is going to look at that and say, because you could easily look at the play we just had with Martinelli and say, yeah, but I mean, he's going the other way, his back's on the right place. I mean, or, you could easily sort of justify it as being, I mean, he's offside, but is it, the spirit of all of that? And that's all fine and good as soon as it's your team that concedes a goal. And that's the part where I'm like, look, if we're gonna do this, we got to do this. The idea, the same thing with the lines, right? We had these fine lines, and then we decide we're gonna thicken them a little bit because maybe it's getting too close. Which okay, but again, what happens when you're on the other side of that and you're looking, going, dude, guys offside? Why is that counted as a goal? Because you've got the referee who says, well, I mean, was he really sure?
Mm-hmm. I hear what you're saying, but here's another thing that I thought of when it comes to the Martinelli call in particular. And as I asked you earlier, what was the on-field ref's decision? Why is it that VAR is not treated like all other VAR calls when it comes to offside, right? We've talked before about a VAR is there to reverse clear and obvious mistakes, right? Mm-hmm. But not for VAR. For VAR, it's get every single VAR call 100% right all the time to the best of the VAR's ability. Don't let any offside thing happen ever, basically.
Well, but no, that is the same thing, right? That is we call it a mistake, like the referee just oopsie. But I mean, obviously, because of the speed they're moving at the time, it's an understandable that he didn't catch that the offside happened because of how close it was or how fast it happened.
Right, or the angle viewing if a linesman is too far upfield when it happens or something doesn't have a clear angle where you could see it. I still think that there would be a role in VAR for offside only reviewing for clear and obvious mistakes, where if they look like the linesman made a justifiable decision at the time, it's not clearly wrong, then the decision on the field stands, right?
Yeah, but once you start getting into that, you kind of open yourself up to that, because now once you start getting into that replay, now we can actually determine where the players were positioned relative to one another, and then actually clear and obvious becomes, well, clear and obvious, right? You can now see it, and once you can see it and measure it that way, now the moment you inject a judgment call into that, I think you're opening yourself up to a dangerous place, but a difficult place to be, and one that everyone is going to be justifiably outraged about
Mm-hmm.
when it hurts them. Right?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. It's kind of like being able to draw the lines makes the decision clear and obvious what it should be.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas I'm saying like the decision on the field should be clearly or obviously wrong. Like, and to me, like kind of to a common sense view, not necessarily like taking out the, you know, what's the caliper, like taking out the calipers to like measure the width of a hair, you know, like, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but that's it. Offside is a very clear line.
Yeah.
You are either onside or you're offside.
It has a mathematical definition.
Right. It's not a foul is a certain degree a judgment call. A card is to a certain degree a judgment call.
Yeah.
But offside isn't. And that's where it comes. That's kind of one of those, once you bring the replay in, okay, well, we can determine this, so we should. Because again,
that makes sense.
The card, the VAR can overturn things like penalties if you watch, and it's a clear and obvious error for like, oh, there wasn't any contact there. He just fell over. Like that's okay. That's not a penalty in the box. Okay, but that's not a penalty. Or it was outside the box, so it's not a penalty. So those are, again, we say mistakes. Like sometimes they're perfectly understandable at the speed of the game, and the point is how are we using the replay to help in these circumstances? And I get the frustration. Okay. I felt the frustration here, but it was the right call, and I can live with that. As that call did not cost us the game in the way that switching off in a moment defensively cost us a goal, and not, I think about the number of chances we created that didn't get in. That's why we dropped points, not because Martinelli was a foot offside.
No, that's true. Point taken. All right. So what is coming up for next week?
Right. Nice and quick here. On Wednesday, back to the Champions League. We're going to play Monaco at home. That'll be on Paramount Plus. A fun game against a French league side. And then on Saturday, Premier League home to Everton. That game will be on Peacock. So a good week at the Emirates coming up.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us at Gooner U. If you're watching on YouTube, you can also listen to our show on Apple, Spotify, and some other places. If you're only listening, try watching us on YouTube with the link in the show notes. Your homework for today is to tell one friend about our show, right? You have at least one friend who likes Arsenal and might like to hear what we have to say. You clearly do, right? So tell that one friend about it. We record the show using Zencaster. If you'd like to try it out, you can support Gooner U by signing up using the link in the description, which also has links to everything we talked about and our social pages. Again, my name is Dove. You can find me on Twitter at Dove Frankel. With me, as always, is Keith, and you can find him in a pub watching Arsenal matches.
So come on, Set Piece FC.